Today's episode of the Mo News Podcast will have very limited commercial interruption, brought to you exclusively by the American Petroleum Institute. Hey everybody, it is Friday, May 22nd. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast as we head into a holiday weekend here in the U.S. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. I hope that everyone has already gotten to their Memorial Day destination or has a game plan today for sitting in traffic.
Yeah, the good news is if you are in traffic, crank up the podcast. We'll keep you company.
We have this podcast. We have a whole week's worth of podcasts. Also, those of you who listen to the daily podcast, you might look in the feed and be like, oh, you sprinkle in these interviews. Yes, nearly weekly. Sometimes there's 2 interviews a week. We'll be putting out another interview this weekend. Premium pod folks, look out there for the Ask Mo Anything podcast, as well as a new premium first interview this weekend. So hopefully between our archive of interviews in the podcast feed, along with what's coming out this weekend, you'll have something to listen to for the 50 million or so of you that are driving this weekend.
And Moshe, while you were celebrating a birthday on Thursday, I hope you had a very happy birthday.
Thank you. It was excellent. With my favorite people in the world, my daughter and my wife.
A radio station in the UK accidentally said that King Charles was dead. So some breaking news at the top. King Charles, not dead, still very much alive. But that radio station called Radio Caroline had to apologize after accidentally announcing the death of King Charles.
This is Radio Caroline. His Majesty King Charles III has passed away. As a mark of respect, we will now be playing suitable continuous music until further notice.
Moshe, they blamed it on a computer glitch which activated their death of a monarch procedure. They say that all stations in the UK have that ready while hoping that they will not use it.
Yeah, that's something that's pretty common, actually. News organizations, both newspapers, but also television networks, will prepare obituaries for prominent people, including leaders, but also famous celebs who might be getting older or sick. At CBS, I remember we had a unit of like 2 or 3 people who prepare obituaries, and we have to update them once in a while, but actually airing them prematurely, yikes. Though I do know of a story, I mean, this has happened at several organizations, Jill. Just before I got to CBS, they had accidentally killed Steve Jobs while he was still alive. They'd put out that story on the internet, and they're like, Steve Jobs is dead. He wasn't dead at the time. Now, of course, he has since passed. But ultimately, they had to apologize for that. That was not a great look. So you got to keep those things under lock and key and ensure that whatever program you're running these days at your network, that doesn't accidentally play the obituary prematurely.
King Charles, by the way, was on a trip to Belfast in Northern Ireland, where he did get pooped on by a bird, which is supposed to be good luck.
Most importantly, Jill, he's alive. So that's the key headline. King Charles
not the
still
poop?
alive. There you go. One thing we should note, since it is a holiday weekend, we will be doing all our coverage over on Premium this weekend, as of today through Monday, for those of you who follow us on Instagram. And we have a special sale going on right now, probably our biggest one ever. Decided I wanted all of you to share in the birthday celebrations. So the code MO44, since I turned the big 44 yesterday, is your code for 44% off, $44 off. Effectively means Premium is $1 a week for the next year. Well, you can't get better than that. So you got to join Mo News Premium for access to all our exclusive coverage on Instagram, all the other platforms, early access to podcasts, exclusive podcasts, including that weekly Ask Mo Anything podcast, all for the special price of just $1 a week for the next year. Use the code MO44 over at mo.news/premium.
All right, let's get to the headlines here. It is the unofficial start of summer, and Americans are not letting high gas prices stop them from getting away. All 50 states now averaging above $4 a gallon gas.
And it's not just prices at the pump, it's also maintaining your car. The war in Iran and the aftermath there is going to make your car's oil change more pricey. We'll get into that.
The end of an era in late night. Stephen Colbert has officially signed off his guests and his goodbye message.
We'll talk a bit about how Colbert changed the game and whether his push into politics, at least one angle of politics, may have hurt the larger late night format.
And as we look ahead to the presidential race in 2028, Democrats have released their autopsy of what went wrong in 2024.
This is the long-delayed autopsy because, of course, we are halfway through 2026 at this point. Jill, what they released with a whole bunch of caveats.
Right. They released a report and then basically said, we have no sources for any of this. It was
we're releasing the report reluctantly because you told us to, but this report sucks and we can't verify any of it. We'll get into it.
Meanwhile, the Department of Justice has announced unprecedented charges in Minnesota related to fraud.
Yeah, the latest here in the fraud investigation and charges that we've been following for months now over there.
To the housing market, spring is supposed to be the prime buying season, but mortgage rates just hit a 9-month high.
We'll get into why.
Also, we've been talking for a while about the fear that AI is coming for our jobs. Well, now California Governor Gavin Newsom is trying to figure out how to help workers.
It comes in a week where we saw thousands of people lose their jobs, especially at tech companies, due to AI. And the concern is that the safety nets at the state and federal level are not enough.
Not everyone is complaining about AI. Elon Musk could become the world's first trillionaire after his company SpaceX goes public. And we are about a week and a half away from hurricane season. NOAA has revealed its hurricane forecast.
And why, while El Niño might have some negative effects on our weather at various points across various parts of the country, it might be helpful when it comes to keeping down the hurricane count.
And it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend. What we are watching, reading, and eating.
Go Knicks.
All right, the holiday weekend is here, and with it, an estimated 45 million Americans are planning to travel at least 50 miles from home between yesterday and Monday. According to AAA's latest projections, this is a slight increase from last year. It sets a new record for the holiday weekend, and more than 39 million people are expected to travel by car. Despite higher gas prices compared to last year, Memorial Day weekend prices are the highest they've been in 4 years. The national average for a gallon of regular is now $4.56. That's up about 3 cents from last week and nearly $1.50 higher than this time last year. Current prices are close to what drivers were paying 4 years ago when the national average on Memorial Day was $4.61. Analysts say that with gas demand on the rise and the prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz tied to the war with Iran, pump prices are likely to remain high as the summer travel season gets underway.
For travelers who are renting cars over the weekend, Hertz said yesterday and today are expected to be the busiest pickup days. No surprise there. Top 5 markets with highest demand, which means, again, have some podcasts ready to listen to. If you are renting cars in Orlando, Vegas, LA, Denver, and Boston, according to AAA booking data, domestic car rentals are 1% cheaper this holiday weekend versus last year. We'll take it, even at 1%. Among the popular domestic destinations, according to other data here, again, not surprising, Orlando, Disney World, Seattle, New York, domestically. Also, a lot of big numbers around Rome, Paris, and Vancouver, Canada. Now, if you are actually looking to avoid traffic, it appears Sunday is your day. Now, of course, that means that you're going to miss Monday. But depending on where you're going and who you're with, maybe you do want to get out of Dodge, wherever you're at, on Sunday. Meanwhile, highest traffic yesterday, today, and Monday. No surprise.
And it isn't just gas prices that are going up. It is also the cost of car maintenance, things like oil changes. A broad group of industrial lubricants known as base oils are in very short supply. And that is because the U.S. imports about 44% of its supply of what is known as these Group 3 base oils, which is the raw material that's used to make motor oil from the Middle East.
Remember, we've told you here that there are many different types of oil, and that oil is then refined into many things, right? Fuel for your car, jet fuel for planes, consumer products, plastics, Vaseline, a whole variety of things come from that oil. And that oil is also refined in a certain way to create motor oil. One of the major suppliers of motor oil used in the U.S. is a Shell facility in Qatar, which was damaged back in March during one of the Iranian attacks there. And they say it's going to take about a year to repair portions of the energy complex there. So shortages here when it comes to motor oil are imminent. By next month, finding adequate supply is going to be a major issue right now, according to analysts. And it's not just the issue in the Strait of Hormuz. Also, South Korea, which also supplies what's called Group 3 oil to the U.S., has seen its production and exports disrupted by the war. And here in the US, where refiners also make that type of oil, well, the base oil that they use there is being diverted to make more diesel fuel, which is also facing its own crunch. So as they sort of move things around on the board and try to handle various shortages and outages there, ultimately, this is a place where, again, you could see an impact when it comes to how much you're paying. There have been attempts by the government here to try to open up some regs in order to make things easier, but you could potentially see a crunch there. So as we've been bringing you energy-related news all week, Jill, on this podcast, trying to get ourselves and all of you smart on all things energy. We've had the American Petroleum Institute as a partner all week. It's one of the reasons why you have been able to listen to this podcast with limited commercial interruption all week long. We also have segments we've been doing over on the Instagram page, again, diving into various aspects of fuel and oil here and around the world. If you want to learn more about energy infrastructure and issues like permitting reform, head over to permittingreformnow.org.
All right, now to some media news. It is the end of an era. After 33 years, CBS has officially aired the final episode of The Late Show with host Stephen Colbert signing off last night. For the show's final week, Colbert welcomed a slew of A-listers like his pal Jon Stewart, Bruce Springsteen, and Steven Spielberg. But details for the finale remained largely under wraps. There were no guests or segments announced in advance. Fans lined up for hours outside of the Ed Sullivan Theater in New York City. So, Moshe, how did it go?
It was definitely an emotional night, Jill, and we should note that his competitors last night, namely Jimmy Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel, decided to run repeats. So all the focus would be on Colbert for his final show after more than a decade on the air there at CBS. There was a lot of invocation of the history of late night. In the beginning, you saw a montage of people like Johnny Carson and Jack Benny and Jay Leno and Letterman and so on and so forth. And so it felt in part like a sort of memorial to late night in general. And that's something we'll get to here in a second as we talk about the predicament of late night comedy here in the U.S. But the show itself did have an emotional start. Colbert began the show by addressing the audience in studio, as well as us at home on camera. Among the things he said is that in part he saw his role was to feel the news with you, saying last night, I sure have felt the news, and I just want to let everyone know in here and out there how important you've been to what we've done. He talked about referring to the show as the joy machine, amidst everything that has been happening in the world over the course of the past decade. In the studio audience at the Ed Sullivan Theater last night included a whole bunch of celebrities, longtime friends of Colbert. That included actors Bryan Cranston, Paul Rudd, and Ryan Reynolds, who had various moments with him in the early part of the show. And there was a huge buildup. Who's going to be his final guest? Who's going to be his final guest? They had a short sketch implying that the Pope was going to be his final guest. But ultimately, the final guest was Paul McCartney. And his appearance really gave the finale sort of a fitting Ed Sullivan Theater resonance, because it was in that exact theater back in 1964 on the Ed Sullivan Show. It really remains one of the buildings, if not the building's main cultural moment. The Beatles appearing on American television on the Ed Sullivan Show. And so McCartney's return to that stage 62 years later add an extra layer of history to the show. McCartney noted during the interview that he can still hear the girls screaming on the balcony, and he actually surprised Stephen with a signed photo from that Beatles performance in the Ed Sullivan Theater. Colbert joking that McCartney wrote on the photo, to Stephen, you're better than the Beatles, to which McCartney wanted to make very clear it doesn't say that. Colbert saying, when I'm done, it will say that, Paul. McCartney reflected on his lifetime in music, on his time in the Beatles. He talked about how he's still writing music after all of these decades. And the two men also talked about how they don't like change, as Colbert, of course, is experiencing a major change here with the end of his show. And then a really powerful end to the show as McCartney joined Colbert and his band, as well as his first band leader, Jon Batiste, who was with the show for a number of years before leaving, returned to the stage to all perform together Hello, Goodbye, classic Beatles song that obviously had a lot of symbolism, given it was Colbert's last show. And they ended by inviting the entire show team, as well as folks from the audience, on stage to sing and dance with them.
Now looking at the business decision behind his show's cancellation, CBS Paramount announced the end of the show back in June of 2025. The network at the time said that it was purely a financial decision against a challenging backdrop in late night. saying it is not related in any way to the show's performance, content, or other matters happening at Paramount. Colbert had been the highest rated host in that time slot for most of his run, but advertising revenue for his show had dropped about 40% since 2018. As we know, young people are increasingly turning to streaming and social media, but the timing did have some people thinking that the decision was political.
Right. If you recall here, the announcement of the show's cancellation came shortly after Colbert accused Paramount of taking a, quote, big fat bribe from the network when effectively Paramount signed a $16 million check to Trump to settle a lawsuit he had filed related to editing he felt was improper at 60 Minutes. Now, many internally at CBS felt actually this is a BS lawsuit that we could have fought. But ultimately, one of the things Paramount wanted at that time was approval by the federal government for their merger, and that approval would happen. So Colbert and others accused them of a quid pro quo and said that part of the deal here was clearly killing me. Now, at the same time, folks over at Paramount say, no, this was merely a financial decision here, that ultimately Colbert was costing us $100 million a year and making less than 70. And so losing $40 million a year. Now, the counterpoint there is, why don't you cut down on the budget there at Colbert as opposed to killing the entire enterprise? Bottom line, late night has had issues, not just at CBS, but a number of networks now for years. Interesting numbers out of a Variety story, Jill. As of 2017, late night television shows were bringing in just over $520 million in revenue. 6 years later, down 60%, just above $200 million in revenue. So down by more than half in just a few years as the ratings numbers have gone down. Well, with fewer people watching, advertisers are willing to pay less. Those viewers are much older. And of course, there's the idea that these shows have gotten particularly political in recent years. For decades, you had people like Johnny Carson or Jay Leno or Dave Letterman that, well, were trying to be equal opportunity critics when it came to politics. They said, well, we have people who watch us in both red states and blue states, and so it's not on us to pick a team. So ultimately, one of the impacts here of Colbert was, well, he became very quickly, he found his legs really, after struggling for the first few months on his show by getting political, sort of reviving some aspects of his Colbert Report that he used to do over on Comedy Central. But ultimately, time and time again, night after night, was going after Donald Trump. So he quickly saw some traction there, some buzz there. And so you saw others, whether it was John Oliver, Hassan Minhaj, Sam Bede, Seth Meyers, Jimmy Kimmel, you could say for years was also pretty critical of Trump and pretty liberal. But certainly he, had the same line there. And so there's a lot of people who felt sort of not spoken to anymore by the late night shows as they double down on liberal politics. And so that's one of the interesting impacts here that Colbert had. Now, he would argue, and the people around him would argue, that he's just speaking truth to power, and that's what he saw as his role. But again, that was very much a deviation from what you'd seen for decades in late night television. And as people sort of write the obituary, if you will, of the Late Show and of late night television on the whole, you keep seeing cuts. You're not going to be surprised in the coming years, Jill, for other networks to potentially replace their late night shows with much cheaper options as opposed to what we saw in the heyday of late night television. But one thing did catch our attention. Conan O'Brien, no stranger late night television, was the host of that later show on NBC for years, then had The Tonight Show. For a brief period, there was a whole controversy with Jay Leno there, then eventually went over to TBS and had his show. Well, he's still hosting award shows and doing his own comedy, but he's also speaking out about comedy. And interestingly, he had this discussion about comedy and the state of comedy in the U.S., especially in regards to Trump, several months ago over the Oxford Union in the UK. We put this clip up back in January, but I want to play a bit of Conan O'Brien and his assessment of where he stayed very vague here. He didn't go after specifically Colbert or anybody else, but spoke generally about where comedians could go awry when it comes to dealing with comedy around Trump. Take a listen.
Comics go the route of, I'm going to just say F Trump all the time, or that's their comedy. And I think, well, now a little bit you're being co-opted because you're so angry. You've been lulled, it's like a siren leading you into the rocks. You've been lulled into just saying F Trump, F Trump, F Trump, screw this guy, and I think you've now put down your best weapon, which is being funny, and you've exchanged it for anger. And that person or any person like that would say, well, things are too serious now. I don't need to be funny. And I think, well, if you're a comedian, you always need to be funny. You just have to find a way. And you just have to find a way to channel that anger into a way that is, because good art will always be a great weapon, will always be a perfect weapon against power. But if you're just screaming and you're just angry, you've lost your best tool in the toolbox. Also,
that Variety piece that you had mentioned noted that a lot of people are looking for an escape from the politics, especially at that time slot right before you're going to sleep.
And Jill, we didn't even get into the fact that like the way that people take in their comedy these days is, well, on Instagram and on TikTok and on YouTube. So the idea that you're trying to like, you need to watch live tonight at 11:30 p.m., well, that ship has sailed a long, long time ago. And that was the core revenue stream for these shows.
And one other quick thing that we have talked about here on this podcast before is that celebrities, which used to be the big guests on these late night shows, stopped doing them because they realized they could promote their movies and whatever else they're doing themselves on social media or on different platforms. And so who's left? Politicians. Is that who you want to watch at 11:30? I don't know.
And podcasters, so you can listen to on a podcast. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, celebs still went on, some of them still, Jill, but also the exclusivity of the celebrity is no longer like such a thing. You know, it's the reason why the red carpet has sort of come and gone. It still exists, but like you used to see these stars on the red carpet, it used to be a big deal. But like now you can follow their TikTok channel and you can follow their Instagram channel and you can see them all the freaking time. And so like the idea, it's like, oh my God, I want to see this like TV star or movie star on late night comedy show tonight. Okay. But like they literally like posted 3 reels today on Instagram. Like I don't need to watch them tonight.
Meanwhile, CBS is going to be replacing The Late Show with Comics Unleashed with Byron Allen. And as for Colbert, Warner Brothers has actually tapped him to write Lord of the Rings next installment. Apparently, Colbert's a super fan.
Yeah, a total super fan, Jill. I don't think he's going to be far from TV, though. His buddy, Jon Stewart, still hosts The Daily Show at least once a week on Mondays. And so I imagine you'll see a revival of maybe the Colbert character. And Colbert will probably pop up over there, pop up with his other buddies like Fallon and Kimmel and Myers and Oliver.
All right, time for the speed read, starting with politics as we look ahead to the race for the White House in 2028. Democrats are taking a look at what went wrong in 2024. From CNN, the Democratic National Committee released a long-awaited autopsy report on the 2024 election. Moshe, interestingly, they're also distancing themselves from the report, saying that it doesn't meet the standards that they would normally have and that many of their claims couldn't be independently verified.
Yeah, a lot of drama around all of this. The report is a year late and has a bunch of red lines in it and incomplete. And they're like, yeah, we didn't think this was very good, so we didn't want to release it. And then we're going to release it, but then we didn't release it because it totally sucks. And we're going to put it on anyway because all of you in the party have been saying it totally, like, we deserve it. But like, FYI, the report itself is like, we don't know if it's like parts of it we even agree with. The annotated report here has red lines from the DNC saying, quote, no sourcing provided for this claim or no evidence for this claim. The DNC chair is this guy named Ken Martin, who's dealing with a lot of controversy here. Jill, I don't know if he's long for this role at this point, given all the incoming he's taken. Remember, the election was back in November 2024, and we're sitting here, approaching June 2026. We're only a few months away now from people announcing their candidacy. And you often see from these parties these quote unquote autopsy reports when they lose an election, like what went wrong. But in this case, like this sort of just speaks to everything. It sort of perfectly encapsulates Democrats in 2024. What went down with Biden, what went down with Harris, and the fact they did a report, but the report sucks, but we're not going to release it, but now we're going to release it. Well, he'd been pummeled for months on this. And so he said, you know what, everyone, have at it.
Okay, so now to what the report says taken with
Even
a
with
grain
all
of
those red
salt, I
lines.
guess.
Yeah.
It argues that Democrats have lost touch with voters, especially in rural America and the South. One line from the report, quote, Harris wrote off rural America, assuming that urban and suburban margins would compensate. It also details how the Biden White House failed to adequately prepare the vice president to lead the ticket. It says the White House did not position or prepare the vice president. Had the White House explored and evaluated ways to leverage Kamala Harris earlier in the administration, perhaps it would have improved the president's standing, and it certainly would have helped prepare her to lead the ticket. It also says Democrats underestimated the effectiveness of Republican attacks on Harris over transgender issues, and it warns the party against feeling overly confident despite those recent state election wins that we've been seeing since 2024. Moshe, comes as the prediction market Kalshi currently ranks Harris as the third most likely 2028 Democratic presidential nominee, behind Governor Gavin Newsom of California and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, AOC.
Though we should mention, none of them have officially announced for president. Newsom is definitely running. There's no reason he wouldn't run at this point. Harris is a question mark, and certainly AOC is a question mark too, as she potentially could. Well, she's super, super young. Her next thing might be taking either running against Schumer's seat, or if he retires, running to be the next senator from New York State. Nothing shocking in this report. You mentioned the whole Democrats lost touch with rural voters. No surprise there. That's been the case for a couple decades. You got to go back to Bill Clinton for the last time there was a real connection there between Democrats and voters outside of urban areas. Also, other top lines from this report: Harris failed to make an affirmative case for herself. She had just over 100 days. But what the report says is that she depended too much on going against Trump and what Trump wasn't, but without actually making the case of what do you stand for, given that your views have changed on various things. That ultimately Biden stepping aside, that whole fiasco was problematic, though it did say that it did help down ticket Democrats at the state level and Congress win there with Biden off the ticket. They say the Trump ad on transgender inmates was highly effective, effectively saying they took a Harris bite from a few years ago where she said that taxpayers should pay for transgender operations for prisoners. And they used that in ads online and on TV. They said that was particularly effective. And, what you mentioned, that the Biden White House did not prepare Harris very well for running. So, the report here is sort of Captain Obvious, no shit, some of these things. But ultimately, Democrats, had this whole internal deliberation. Apparently, Josh Shapiro, another person who's looking to run for president, the governor of Pennsylvania, apparently had a call with Ken Martin that, according to NBC, freaked out Ken Martin. So I don't know what he was threatening Ken Martin, but basically a whole bunch of top Democrats are get this report out. It makes us look so bad that it's not out there. Even if the report sucks or you disagree with it, you promised it, and we need to fulfill our promises here. So that's where we're at. According to the report, they interviewed 300 Democrats in 50 states. So anyway, the DNC head here, Ken Martin, we'll see, how long he's for. But ultimately, typically when you lose campaigns, it is not for one reason or two reasons or 10 reasons. It's for 100 different reasons. This report lays out a number of them. Circumstances change going into this year's midterms. Circumstances will be different going into 2028. Sometimes you can glean certain lessons. One thing that I remember came out, Jill, of the so-called autopsies in 2012 from the Republican side. And remember, the Republicans had lost the presidency in 2008 with McCain versus Obama. The Republicans lost again in 2012 with Romney versus Obama. And what did the GOP autopsy say after losing two straight elections? We need to appeal to the middle. We got to appeal to Latinos. We need more of a centrist candidate. Who did Republicans nominate in 2016? Donald John Trump. So effectively, the autopsy could tell you one thing about what we should do. It's possible that if you do the complete opposite, you might remake American politics and find a candidate who has dominated politics for the last decade and won 2 terms. So, that's the thing about these autopsies. We need to do this. And it's ultimately, the primary voters are going to decide what you do.
I was listening to an interview with David Axelrod, who ran President Obama's campaign, and he had a quote saying, "You're never as smart as you look when you win, and never as dumb as you look when you lose."
Yeah, and given what's going on with AI, given everything else happening in the country, 2024 is going to seem like ancient history when we go into 2028 and the candidates are figuring out how to appeal to voters.
Okay, from the Mo News Instagram, a major headline that we have been following for months now. The Justice Department announced criminal charges against 15 defendants accused of stealing more than $90 million from taxpayer-funded programs in Minnesota. Prosecutors accused defendants of exploiting autism and disability programs, including billing Medicaid, the public health plan that covers low-income Americans, for services never provided. The DOJ says, quote, the fraud in Minnesota is shocking. Officials said one state housing program for homeless residents was completely shut down after fraud exploded from an estimated $2.5 million annual cost to more than $104 million by 2024.
So this is a story we've been talking about for a while now. You might remember that YouTube investigation by the conservative influencer Nick Shirley back last December. Some of the groups and individuals involved in some of these facilities were featured in that YouTube video. Minnesota has really become the center here of several major fraud investigations tied to COVID, child nutrition programs, Medicaid, childcare subsidies, other government benefits here. When you look at the numbers right now, nearly 100 people so far have been charged over the last few years in a variety of different frauds, some related, some unrelated. Some have already gone to prison. There have been at least 63 convictions, I believe, according to our numbers so far. Plus, you have these 15 new Medicaid and welfare defendants. A top Justice Department official, again, they're playing a big number here, but they say that the losses related to fraud here in Minnesota could exceed the previously estimated $9 billion estimate. Now, we're already at north of $1 billion, Jill, but they say they are going to continue to investigate this, and they expect to be making more announcements in the coming months here. It does come as we got news this week that a judge in Minnesota sentenced one woman who led one of these frauds, Jill, to 42 years in prison. Her name is Amy Bach. She was sentenced to prison for her role in a $250 million fraud scheme tied to pandemic food aid programs. Prosecutors called it the largest COVID fraud scheme in U.S. history. She is not Somali, but there are a number of Somali Americans who were involved in that fraud. But I guess they're trying to make a point here by sending her away to jail for fraud for 40 years. How long she ends up serving is a question mark here, but that number struck us. And there were other announcements related to Minnesota and fraud yesterday when it comes to other schemes related to diagnosing kids who didn't have autism with autism in order to be able to bill the government for autism services. And Minnesota is not alone here. We've seen increasing fraud investigations in California, in Indiana, in Ohio, and a number of other states. And remember that President Trump has tasked Vice President J.D. Vance with being the so-called fraud czar. So investigations are happening at a local level, state level, and of course you have Vance and I guess some folks around him looking into things.
All right, some news when it comes to the housing market from the Wall Street Journal. Mortgage rates this week rose to the highest level since August. More bad news for home shoppers during what is usually the busiest time of the year for home sales. The average rate on a 30-year fixed mortgage rose to 6.51% this week from 6.36% last week. Higher mortgage rates and expensive home prices are keeping many would-be buyers on the sidelines. Rising costs in many places for home insurance and property taxes have also spooked buyers. But the rise in mortgage rates this year marks a reversal from the second half of 2025 when rates declined after the Fed started to ease short-term interest rates. Mortgage rates actually dipped below 6% in February, which boosted expectations for a busy spring after 3 straight years of lackluster activity. But that brief momentum has stalled.
Right, especially given the war in Iran, the rise in oil prices, worries about inflation. Well, a lot of people are avoiding right now major purchases, and it's hard to get bigger if you're a family than the purchase of a home until things calm down. So you look at a variety of numbers here. Existing home sales were flat in April. That was below initial expectations, partially again due to the war. And mortgage rates look to keep rising here after leaning towards another interest rate cut. Before the war in Iran, Fed officials are now weighing whether to raise rates due to the inflation concerns here, especially given the recent reports that we've seen. And remember that it's not just the housing market as a standalone thing. There are a lot of other businesses that depend on a robust housing market because when you move homes or purchase a new home, well, you tend to buy a lot of other stuff, right? You tend to do renovations, you're buying furniture, you're buying various furnishings, you're buying appliances, you're buying a lot of things. So there are a lot of sort of trickle effects here of all of that, Jill. When we were in Minneapolis recently for Target's earnings announcement back in early March, they were talking about this, that ultimately stores like Target and others that depend on, a lot of people buying homes, because then you're going to buy a new couch, you're going to buy various new decorations for your home, that ultimately they're seeing it in their numbers. So this has a huge economic impact. And so, one of the things that they're doing at stores like that is they're focused on sort of more home entertainment related items as opposed to home renovation type items or, new purchases. And so that's something to keep in mind here as we talk about this, that, everything in the economy tends to impact another thing. And so you do see a domino effect of all of this.
All right, now to a story that we are tracking, I think, daily, Moshe, on this podcast. The impact of AI. The state of California wants to be ready if a lot of workers lose their jobs. From the Wall Street Journal, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed an executive order on Thursday to study how artificial intelligence affects employment and also explore ways to help displaced workers. Newsom, as we mentioned before, is a Democrat, and he's seen as a potential 2028 presidential candidate. So this order follows signs of growing public discontent over the rapid rise of AI, also the proliferation of these massive data centers around the U.S., and just anxiety that the technology could widely displace white-collar workers. California is a hotbed for AI companies, so it is also a big beneficiary of the wealth that they're generating, but it's also home to huge technology companies that are citing AI investment as they shed workers. Yesterday, we reported about Meta currently laying off thousands of workers as it looks to transform around AI. So as for Newsom's order, it mandates that state agencies work with academics, labor groups, and the AI industry to figure out how to subsidize companies that keep employees instead of replacing them with technology. It also calls to expand job training programs specifically for white-collar workers.
So interesting, Newsom's doing this. This is going to be a key issue for the candidates going to 2028. As we see very quickly here, company after company announce layoffs, and it's adding up. And you're seeing it first in tech, but soon enough, you might see it in other sectors, whether it's legal or finance, especially as AI continues to get better. Agentic AI, which effectively means you're getting replaced by agentic AI, the AI that can make decisions like a human and basically use other AI, or use itself, I should say, to basically carry out your job, is going to lead to tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands, and then millions potentially of job losses here in the coming years. The key thing you're hearing from Newsom and some folks in Washington increasingly is that traditional unemployment benefits will not be enough to handle what's coming, especially in the next couple of years. That, long distance, there is a sense that just like the internet, that ultimately a whole bunch of jobs will get created due to AI, things like all the apps that were created because of smartphones and Uber drivers. All these jobs didn't exist years ago, but ultimately, what's going to carry us over? What benefits are available? What retraining is going to be available to potentially millions of people who are going to lose their jobs, and where will they go? Especially those of you who are in the tech world who are losing your job, where, you might have lost your job at Meta yesterday, but, well, everyone else is announcing cuts in tech world too. So what jobs are you applying to at this juncture if you work in certain sectors? So in California, they've ordered a study to look at giving all California residents a share in assets like stocks, bonds, or wealth funds, a kind of financial safety net where everyone owns a small piece of the economy, including severance and other forms of compensation, such as company stock. In California, Newsom's orders the launch here of a dashboard tracking AI's impact on employment across different sectors using data from California's unemployment insurance system. So we start to get a real sense here of what is AI related. There potentially could be some lessons learned for other states. There's going to be a big question as to how Washington's going to handle all of this. But huge, huge ramifications for our economy, Jill, in the coming months and years. And government will have to figure out what to do about it all. Societal impact. Joe, we're getting some breaking news from ESPN here as we record the podcast on Thursday evening. Kyle Busch, a NASCAR Cup champion, is dead at the age of 41. He had been the winningest driver across NASCAR's 3 top series, a 2-time NASCAR Cup Series champion, but he withdrew from this weekend's Coca-Cola 600 due to what his team had termed a severe illness. They are not revealing what he had, Jill, but he was only 41 years old. You're seeing remembrances come out As we record this, NASCAR, writing on their X feed, we're saddened and heartbroken to share the news of the passing of Kyle Busch. We extend our deepest condolences to his family, Richard Childress Racing, and the entire motorsports community. This is pretty shocking news, Jill, just given how young he was. He had won 234 races across NASCAR's top 3 series. He won the Cup Series championship in 2015 and 2019. He is survived by his wife, Samantha, an 11-year-old son, and a 4-year-old daughter.
Okay, and finally, we're about a week and a half away from the official start of hurricane season, and a new prediction about the severity of the season from Fox Weather. NOAA has released its official 2026 Atlantic hurricane season forecast, predicting a below-average season with 8 to 14 named storms, 3 to 6 hurricanes, which would include 1 to 3 major hurricanes that would be Cat 3 or above. By comparison, an average Atlantic hurricane season produces 14 named storms, including 7 hurricanes and 3 major hurricanes. NOAA says that we could thank the El Niño climate pattern, which can suppress tropical development in the Atlantic Ocean. Government forecasters say that El Niño will likely overcome the influence of expected above average ocean temperatures. So that would normally fuel hurricane formation. El Niño is one of 3 phases of a climate cycle. And during El Niño, above average water temperatures in the central and eastern Pacific Ocean produce strong winds that would hinder tropical development in the Atlantic and enhance development in the eastern Pacific.
So El Niño has a lot of impact here across the country. It leads to typically more rain in the southwest, milder winters in the north, better conditions for some crops, but then worse conditions for other crops. Now, if you live on the eastern seaboard or in the Gulf, one positive effect of El Niño is to increase wind shear over the Atlantic, which can suppress hurricane formation. So there's sort of a mixed bag here when it comes to El Niño. And this is something we saw from the other major hurricane forecast that we look to every year out of Colorado State University. They put out their forecast every April. NOAA does it at the end of May. This Colorado State University forecast put a prediction of 13 named storms, 6 hurricanes, 2 major ones. Now, they don't predict where they'll go. They could all go out to sea like last year, or they could all make landfall, whether they be in the Caribbean, Mexico, or the U.S. But as for the predictions here, the CSU prediction, the Colorado State University prediction, is the fewest predicted since 2019. They, by the way, have pioneered early year hurricane season forecasts going back to the mid-'80s. And Jill, some people are calling this year's El Niño a super El Niño, given its power. And so that could mean we can get a revision later this summer or into the fall of even fewer hurricanes. But it is something we will watch very closely. The first named storm of the Atlantic season does not typically form until about the 3rd week of June, though the first named hurricane typically comes in August. But you can never predict these things where they go. But nonetheless, at least when it comes to hurricane season, or the Atlantic hurricane season, I should say, because you have those types of storms in all oceans, there will be fewer, thankfully. And again, we're coming off of last year where no hurricane made landfall in the U.S. for the first time in a very long time.
And even if there are fewer hurricanes, if that hurricane happens to hit your area, it is still potentially life-changing.
Right. It could be one horrific hurricane, sadly. And that's a reason why we'll closely monitor it as we do every season.
All right, Moshe, it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend. Time for what we are watching, reading, and eating. What are you watching?
So, Jill, I think we're both watching the NBA playoffs right now.
Yes, that is what I am watching, specifically the Knicks, who pulled off the largest playoff comeback in franchise history in Game 1. They actually came back from a 22-point deficit in the 4th quarter to defeat the Cleveland Cavaliers in overtime.
Right, so that series continues. That's very exciting. And then over in the West, we're watching the Thunder and the Spurs. I got a lot to catch up on. I've been letting a whole bunch of episodes build up with The Pit. Haven't finished the season yet. Also, Friends and Neighbors over on Apple TV, the John Hamm Show. Haven't got to that. And also on my list, Jill, this weekend, the Kevin Hart roast on Netflix that came out last weekend. There's a lot of buzz about that one. I haven't gotten to watch that yet.
I am caught up on Friends and Neighbors, and I am loving this season.
There's a lot of twists.
Okay, Moshe, what are you reading?
Jill, if you're a premium member this weekend, you will get our interview with God Saad. He is out with his book, Suicidal Empathy, which hit #1 on the New York Times bestselling list. Some very controversial ideas. You might find yourself nodding in agreement. You might find yourself throwing something across the room with his views. But certainly one of the reasons that we had him on was due to the fact that a lot of people are buying his book, but also that some of his philosophy definitely has gotten increasingly popular, especially on the right. So his book is Suicidal Empathy. And if you don't have the book but want to get a sense of his philosophy, that's available this weekend first for premium podcast listeners. Jill, what are you reading?
Moshe, I'm reading a guest essay in the New York Times. It is called How the Jerks I Grew Up With on Long Island Took Over the Country. It is written by Carla Sosenko, who I'm friendly with, herself a Long Island native, and she looks at how some TV villains all seem to be from Long Island. So if you're not from Long Island, you may not pick up on it, but everyone from Stephen DeMarco and Tell Me Lies, he's apparently from Suffolk County, to Niall Jarvis and The Beast in Me. So she interviewed Gabe Rotter, the TV writer behind Beast in Me. He grew up on Long Island in Syosset. He's a friend of the pod. And I love this quote. He said, "You can't overestimate what it means to grow up 30 miles from the most intense city on earth and not be in it. You can feel that on Long Island. You're there, but you're not there. The proximity without belonging is kind of a very specific psychic wound that Nassau County inflicts on its people." That's us, Moshe. Proud Long Islander here.
You could go back to like Great Gatsby, Jay Gatsby, right? Like, there's a long history of various characters, either from Long Island, based in Long Island, some real world. Jordan Belfort, right? Wolf of Wall Street.
She talks about it. And when you really think about it and do this psychoanalysis, I guess it makes sense.
For those of us from the 90s, wasn't Joey Buttafuoco?
Joey Buttafuoco. There have been a couple of serial killers from Long Island.
What's going on out there?
I don't know. What is in the water?
George Santos?
George Santos. She did mention that
too. All right, Jill, what are you eating this weekend?
So I tried this new recipe for 2-ingredient healthy onion rings. I happen to be in this onion kick where I've been like obsessed with putting onions in my cooking. This is a recipe from Hungry Happens. It is not actually 2 ingredients when you factor in olive oil and seasoning. I thought they were good. I can post that recipe if anyone would like over on my Instagram.
Quite a recommendation.
No,
Good.
I love Parmesan and I love onion. I wasn't sure how I felt about the Parmesan and the onion, but I like them enough to make them again. And everyone from last Friday, I still owe you guys my chicken recipe. I have not forgotten. I just haven't made it since the last Friday's episode. Moshe, you were sick last week, but I had promised everyone this chicken recipe, but I just haven't made it. So I promise the next time I do, I will document it. Moshe, what are you eating? I know what you're eating, actually.
You guys, thank you. But it turns out Jill sent me a box of ice cream, and then separately, the Mo News team got together and got me a Gold Belly monthly subscription to ice cream. So none of you bought me a freezer, but you guys all bought me so much ice cream, I will have to hand it out to neighbors on the Upper East Side of New York.
It's an ice cream party.
It's going to be an ice cream party. I'm going to eat a lot of ice cream because you guys, my colleagues love me and they all know me for one thing. And so they all decided to get me the same thing this birthday season. So Jill got me McConnell's ice cream, which is an ice cream brand based out of Santa Barbara, California. And then the team got me a Gold Belly monthly subscription to ice cream. So stay tuned for my reviews of various flavors and brands in the weeks and months ahead.
The backstory, in case you guys were just thinking, what is happening at Mo News that we did
Can they coordinate?
Is that Ren, our COO, had texted me asking me if I had any suggestions for a birthday gift. And I had said the only thing I could come up with is ice cream. And that was going to be my gift because we went for that birthday dinner. And somehow she missed that text. And so that's what happened. And so separately, separately the team came up with that. I guess we just all came to the same conclusion, but just on our own. If somebody out there
in podcast world wants to send me a small freezer, I'm going to need it if I'm going to actually be able to keep all this ice cream going until I complete it. But don't consider this a lack of gratitude, Jill. I am incredibly thankful for my colleagues and all of you and the, incredible amount of ice cream that you have gifted me in the coming months.
That diet is not starting anytime soon.
No. Yeah. I also need you guys to pay for a tailor coming up to open up all of my pants.
Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you guys for listening to the Mo News podcast on this Friday before a long weekend. We will not be having an episode, by the way, on Memorial Day. So we'll see you back here on Tuesday. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you do not miss an episode. Review us in the App Store. And if you value our news coverage, consider joining the Mo News Premium community. Moshe, as you've mentioned, this is a good time to do it.
Mo44. Mo44 is your code. It's effectively $1 a week for a year of premium at this point. You're not going to get a better deal than that. It helps us keep this train going and growing and going faster and covering more things, expanding the team and doing interviews and original coverage. And your support also keeps all of the things that we do for free for everybody. So if you are able to join, consider this the best deal of the year. It runs through the weekend. Mo44 over at mo.news/premium.
All right, everyone, have a great weekend.
See ya Tuesday. Today's episode with limited commercial interruptions was made possible by the American Petroleum Institute. Learn more about energy infrastructure and permitting reform by heading to permittingreformnow.org.